Have you ever really thought about what it takes for a good person, a trusted colleague, to just break bad and commit a major fraud? It's a pretty chilling thought, and it's one that keeps a lot of people up at night. Today, we're going to get inside the mind of a white-collar criminal and see how our understanding of why people cheat has grown from a simple three-sided shape into something much, much more revealing. Let's just start with a number, a really big one. $6.3 billion. Now, according to a major study by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, that's the total loss from the cases they looked at. And, as huge as that sounds, the really scary part, that's just the amount they can actually fine. And this quote right here, it just says it all, doesn't it? That $6.3 billion, that's just what you can see above the water, the tip of the iceberg. What's lurking underneath are all the hidden costs. Things like destroyed reputations, tanking morale, lost productivity. The true cost is almost impossible to calculate. So how do we even begin to wrap our heads around this? Well, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the granddaddy of them all, the classic fraud triangle. Then we'll see how a new shape, the fraud diamond, added a really critical piece to the puzzle. After that, we'll talk about the one missing ingredient that can stop a fraud before it even starts. And finally, we'll pull it all together into a new, modern model and talk about why any of this actually matters in the real world. All right, so let's jump in our time machine and go back to 1953. A criminologist named Donald Cressy sat down and interviewed hundreds of convicted embezzlers. He wanted to know why they did it. And out of those conversations came the absolute foundation of fraud theory, an idea that would be the gold standard for like half a century. And here it is, the famous fraud triangle. For decades, if you wanted to understand fraud, this was your go-to guide. The theory is actually pretty simple. For a regular, trusted person to commit fraud, you need three things to happen all at the same time. Let's take a look at each side. First up, you've got pressure. This is the why. It's the motivation. That secret financial problem that they feel they just can't share with anyone. We're talking about someone drowning in medical bills, maybe a hidden gambling problem, or even just a sales guy facing insane targets from corporate that he can't possibly meet. That's the pressure. Okay, next side of the triangle, opportunity. This is the how. The person has to see a way to do it. They need to spot a weakness, a loophole in the system that they can exploit. Maybe they know the accounting software inside and out, or they're in a position of trust with basically zero oversight. The key word here is perception. They have to believe they can get away with it. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most fascinating piece, rationalization. This is the story the person tells themselves to make it okay. It's that little voice in their head that says, hey, I'm just borrowing it, I'll pay it back. Or, you know what, after all my hard work, the company owes me this. Or even, it's a huge company, nobody's really getting hurt. It's what lets them look in the mirror and still see a good person. Now, the fraud triangle was a game changer, for sure. But after a while, experts started to scratch their heads and say, wait a minute, what if you have all three of those things lined up? The pressure, the opportunity, the rationalization, but the person just doesn't have the guts or the skills to actually go through with it. And that question right there opened the door for a whole new way of thinking. And that leads us right to the year 2004. A couple of researchers, David Wolf and Dana Hermanson, they took a hard look at the triangle and said, there is a piece missing. They argued that it's not enough to just have the motive. You also have to have the actual ability to pull off the crime. And just like that, the triangle got an upgrade. It became the fraud diamond. You can see it keeps those original three elements we talked about, but it adds that critical fourth point, capability. It literally fills in a gap in the old way of thinking. So what exactly is capability? Well, you can think of it as the personal toolkit someone needs to not only see the chance for fraud, but to actually make it happen. It's the bridge that takes someone from just thinking about doing something wrong to successfully getting it done. So what kind of person are we talking about here? Well, they're often in a position of authority where they can just override controls. They're smart, smart enough to figure out how to game the system. They tend to have a big ego, a real sense of confidence that they won't get caught. And maybe the most important trait, they can handle the stress. They can lie to your face, go home, and sleep like a baby. Okay, so now we've got our 4 points: pressure, opportunity, rationalization, and capability. You'd think that's the whole story, right? But it turns out, even when all 4 of those things are in place, a fraud still might not happen. Why? Because there's one final overriding factor that can act as the ultimate emergency brake. And that final missing ingredient, it's just personal ethics. Plain and simple. A person's own moral compass, their core beliefs about what's right and what's wrong, can be the ultimate gatekeeper. Someone with a strong sense of integrity might feel the pressure, see the opportunity, and even have the capability, but their own values will just stop them dead in their tracks. And all of this brings us right up to today, to the most current thinking on fraud. By taking the original triangle, adding the diamond's fourth point, and then layering on the role of ethics, we've now got a new, integrated model. It's the most complete picture we have for really understanding and hopefully preventing fraud. And here it is, the whole shebang. You can see you've got the four elements of the diamond right there in the middle, but look at how ethical values act as this sort of wrapper around the entire thing. This model shows us that ethics isn't just another box to check. It's the force that can either amplify or completely neutralize all the other factors combined. Look, I know this can all seem a little academic, right? We're talking triangles and diamonds and models, but understanding this evolution from a simple theory to a more complex one has huge real-world consequences. This gives organizations a much smarter way to think about stopping fraud before it even has a chance to start. So what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, it really boils down to three key things. First, you have to assess your risk. Really look for those classic pressures and opportunities inside your own company. Second, you have to actively build an ethical culture. You can't just assume people have one. And third, and this is the big one, it all comes down to tone at the top. If the leaders aren't living and breathing this stuff, nobody else will either. And that really leaves us with one final, powerful thought to chew on. If a strong ethical culture is the ultimate defense against fraud, does that mean that a weak or unethical culture, one set by the people in charge, is actually the ultimate opportunity for fraud to grow? It's a tough question, but one every single organization really needs to ask itself.